Hello, everybody. My name's Carter, and today I'd like to talk about my March Madness predictions with everybody. Uh, so I hope you guys enjoy, but let's get right into it, and let's start with the South region. First game we're going to look at is the top seed in the tournament, Auburn. They'll be playing one of Alabama State or St. Francis. I think, regardless of who they play, I don't think they'll see too much trouble there. Um, Looking into this next game, this is a really interesting one. Louisville versus Creighton. Um, for me, I believe that the way Creighton's played in the last few weeks, particularly defensively, is not has not been at a level that will allow them to win games in March Madness, especially against a strong team like Louisville, who I believe to be quite underseeded. I thought they could have been a 5 or a 6 seed, and they're looking at an 8. And so, with that in mind, I like Louisville to advance into the second round. Next game we have here is Michigan versus UC San Diego. Uh, UC San Diego is a team that a lot of people are picking, and I can understand why. Uh, I debated on it. I liked UC San Diego a lot all year. They had a strong season, and I'd say of the 4-12 seeds of UC San Diego, Colorado State, McNeese State, and Liberty, I'd say of those four teams, UC San Diego is probably the strongest. But I think Michigan and all the momentum they're carrying in right now, just winning the Big Ten championship, I think I like them to carry on forward and get another win. Here's an interesting one. We have Texas A&M versus Yale, and I'm going to go with my first upset here. I like Yale in this one. You see, with Texas A&M, they get so many points off of turnovers, and Yale doesn't really turn the ball over. And we've seen with Yale in past years, they've been able to get big upsets in the tournament. Wins against Baylor previously. Obviously, they got the win against Auburn last year, and I think that Yale will get another big first round win. I like Yale to advance. Ole Miss versus San Diego State or North Carolina. At the time I'm recording, the first four games haven't been played yet. Uh, I like San Diego State to beat North Carolina, but I like Ole Miss to win against either of those teams. Next, there's Iowa State versus Lipscomb. I think Iowa State will be able to handle business there pretty quickly. And looking at that next game, we have Marquette versus New Mexico. This was another one that I found to be interesting. I like the way that New Mexico plays, but I think that Marquette will be able to slow the pace down, and they'll be able to control the tempo, and I think that'll allow Marquette to get a win and advance to the next round. In that last game, Michigan State versus Bryant. Bryant's a tricky team at the bottom. I was thinking before I saw the brackets that depending on who they get, and depending on if they're a 14 or a 15, I may pick them to win a game, but I don't like the matchup for them against Michigan State. I think that Michigan State defense will just kind of grind them down, and also I believe that Michigan State with Tom Izzo, it's kind of just not smart to pick against him in the first few rounds. But into the round of 32 in this region, Auburn versus Louisville. This one is very interesting. For one, it's in the state of Kentucky, not in Louisville, but it's in Lexington. But I still think that Auburn will be able to. They'll be able to use the experience that they have throughout that team, and just all the experience with Chad Baker-Mazar, Janai Broome, all those guys being in college basketball for so long. I think the experience will see them through against a Louisville team with less continuity. Pat Kelsey having a great first year as a Louisville head coach, but I think that Louisville's run will end there to the top seed in the tournament. Michigan versus Yale. I like Michigan in this one. I think that I honestly would not be too shocked if Yale were to get a second win in the tournament, but I'm going to go with Michigan here. I think that the way Danny Wolf has played in the Big Ten tournament in the weeks prior will be a huge boost for them, and it'll help them move into the Sweet 16. Ole Miss versus Iowa State. This was one that I got stuck on for quite some time. I think when it comes down to it, that Iowa State defense will be able to slow down the Ole Miss offense, and I think that Iowa State will be able to create some points off of turnovers, and they'll be able to grind out a close win. Michigan State versus Marquette. I like Michigan State in this one, and I like Michigan State by a pretty wide margin. Honestly, I think that I don't like the way Marquette finished the season, and obviously had two tough losses to St. John's, but from really like February onward, they didn't look like the team that we saw them be in the first half of the season. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Michigan State. Now in the Sweet 16 in this region, Auburn versus Michigan, I'm going to go with Michigan getting the win against the top seed. For Auburn, my biggest gripe is when teams start the year as dominant as Auburn and they look like a consensus one seed to the point where they get into February, they get into the month of March especially, and there's no doubt in their mind, and there's no doubt in anybody's mind that they'll be a one seed in the tournament, and that team tails off into March and they start to have more concerning results. They don't look as dominant. The record tails off. Those teams tend to lose earlier in the tournament. And I like Michigan. I like Michigan against Auburn. I think that Golden for Michigan will be the key factor in helping them advance to another round. And that other matchup, Iowa State versus Michigan State. I'm going to go with Michigan State again. I think that they've just been so complete all season on both sides of the ball. I think that will help them get past another tough foe. And then we get into the Elite Eight, where you have Michigan versus Michigan State, obviously the in-state rivalry. Michigan State won both games in the regular season. I think that'll be fresh on the minds of the Michigan players, and I'll go with Dusty May's team to finally break through and get that win against Michigan State. All right, next up we've got the West region. The top seed in that bracket is Florida, and in the first round they'll be taking on 16 seed Norfolk State. I like Florida to do what they're expected to do and handle business in that one. Next up, we've got UConn versus Oklahoma. I think that the lack of depth on this UConn team and the struggles they've had on defense will hurt them against an Oklahoma team who has also had their own struggles on defense, but you never really see their offense go ice cold like you have seen with UConn over the course of a season, and I think that there's a real possibility that UConn comes out and they're just not up for it. And with that in mind, I'm going to go with Oklahoma to move on to the next round. 5 versus 12, Memphis versus Colorado State. Colorado State, one of the hottest teams coming into the tournament, victorious in 10 straight now. And they'll be playing a great Memphis team, but I think they're playing an overseeded Memphis team. And that's not to take away from Memphis, but I don't believe that they should be on the 5 line. I think they should be around a 7 or an 8. And with that in mind, I'm going to take Colorado State. I believe that they'll pick up their 11th straight win and keep a great run that they've been on the last few months now. Maryland versus Grand Canyon. I've seen some people going for Grand Canyon in this one, which is expected after Grand Canyon had the upset last year against St. Mary's to move into the second round. But I'm not quite a fan of Grand Canyon. I don't believe that if you can slow the game down, I don't believe in Grand Canyon's ability to still run their offense the way they want to, and I trust Maryland's ability to control the tempo, play the basketball that they want to play, and move into the next round. Next, we've got Missouri versus Drake, 6 versus 11. I like Missouri in this one. I think that they've got so much size and a lot of guys who can defend a lot of different positions. I think that will help Missouri get some takeaways from a Drake team that doesn't usually turn the ball over a lot. I think that they'll be able to get some points in transition in that manner. Texas Tech versus UNC Wilmington. Texas Tech is getting healthy, and I think that their offense will get rolling again after a little bit of a struggle later in the season. But I think that they'll be able to get rolling again, getting healthy for the tournament, and I believe that they will win their first round matchup against UNC Wilmington. Kansas versus Arkansas, a disappointing year for both of these teams. Were expected to be much higher up the bracket. Both of these schools were. Arkansas especially has really stumbled into the tournament as of late. They had the very bad loss to South Carolina that in a year where the bubble is stronger, that loss to South Carolina in which they not only lost, but they got ran out of the gym from tip-off. In an average year, I believe that loss would have kept them out of the tournament altogether. But they're here, but I don't think Arkansas will be here for long. I like Kansas to advance. St. John's versus Omaha. I think St. John's is going to be handling their business here, getting an easy win against a weaker opponent. Into the round of 32. Florida against Oklahoma. These two teams faced off in the regular season being SEC opponents, and Florida just dominated the game from the get-go. They were stronger on the glass. They were the faster team. They were the more athletic team, and I think that will be repeated when they play, if they were to play again. And I believe they will play again, and I believe we'll see more of the same. I like Florida big. Colorado State against Maryland. I think that Maryland will be able to win this game. I think similarly to how they were able to control the game against Grand Canyon. Now, obviously there's differences in playing Grand Canyon and playing Colorado State because Colorado State doesn't push the pace in the way that Grand Canyon does. But still, I believe that Maryland will be able to get a win here and move into the next round. Missouri versus Texas Tech. I think that the Missouri team doesn't rebound well enough to match up against a Texas Tech team that does rebound very well, and Missouri has especially struggled on the defensive glass. And with that in mind, I like Texas Tech to move on. St. John's versus Kansas. This one's a tough one because Kansas has, at times, their offenses gotten it clicking, and they've been unstoppable. But I don't think that they'll be able to do that against a very strong St. John's defense. I think St. John's will move to the next round. Into the Sweet 16, Florida against Maryland. This is a matchup, and we'll see a lot of these throughout the tournament, of a team that plays a very fast pace in Florida versus a team that plays a much slower game in Maryland. I believe that the game that Florida wants to play will be something they can execute, because a problem that you'll see with a lot of fast-paced teams, and a problem that you saw with Florida last tournament is, and throughout the season last season, is that they play at fast pace, but then they struggle to get stops, and then the opposing offense gets too hot, and they can't run in transition as much as they want to because they're giving up all these shots, and they can't. There's no way to ignite the fast break if they're always scoring on you. But I believe that now, a much stronger defense, they'll be able to get a win against Maryland and move into the Elite Eight. And then 2 versus 3, Texas Tech versus St. John's. I like St. John's in this one. I think that will be one of the most interesting matchups of the tournament if we were to see it happen. A very high-powered offense at Texas Tech when everybody's healthy against a very strong St. John's defense. What I think the key separator will be is that St. John's team is very physical, and they'll be able to run the Texas Tech players off the line. They'll be able to press all the way up the court if they feel like it. They can switch between man and zone, and I think the defense of St. John's will see them through to another round. But I think in the Elite Eight, Florida will be too complete of a team for St. John's, and I think that they will head to the Final Four this year after they get a win against St. John's. Next up, we're looking at the East region. The top seed in that region is Duke. They'll be taking on one of American or Mount St. Mary's. Again, I like the one seed to advance. Don't see much of a problem occurring for them. Mississippi State versus Baylor. These are two tough teams, two teams that defend well, rebound well. I lean towards Mississippi State in this one, mainly because I think Baylor's offense at times has been a bit too clunky, and I don't trust many of their guys to get to score on an individual level, if that makes sense. I believe that when it comes down to it, and if there's a scenario where they need somebody to just score in isolation, that'll be a problem for them more so than it would for Mississippi State. On to the 5 versus 12, Oregon against Liberty. Oregon does not really, under Dana Altman, Oregon has never really struggled in the early rounds, especially in matchups that they're expected to win. So I like Oregon to see the round of 32. Arizona versus Akron. I'm gonna go with the upset here. I like the high-powered offense of Akron. I think that Arizona is a team that can definitely score too, but I think Akron can score with them. And I think with that in mind, the when it comes down to those high volume shootouts, I think a lot of those really tend to favor the underdogs because they're playing with less pressure. And so I'm going to go with Akron to get the upset of the 4 seed Arizona. Next up, BYU versus VCU. BYU is a really big team. They've got Igor Denham, 6'9", around that range, starting at point guard. But they've got a big team, and I think that'll frustrate mid majors in general. And I think that VCU isn't an exception. They may not have the size to match up, and so I'll go with BYU. 3 seed Wisconsin versus 14 seed Montana. I like Wisconsin in this one. Montana has had a great season, but I don't think that they'll be able to. I don't think they'll be able to score back with Wisconsin. I think the Wisconsin offense would just be a bit too much for them. Number 7 St. Mary's versus number 10 Vanderbilt. This is an interesting one because Vanderbilt is a team that really likes to push the pace, and obviously St. Mary's with Randy Bennett, they play a very slow brand of basketball. And last year, St. Mary's ran into Grand Canyon, who is another team that really likes to gun down the court, and I thought that St. Mary's would force a bunch of turnovers and that they'd win easily, but they didn't, obviously. Grand Canyon went on to win the game. But in this matchup, I think that St. Mary's will get the win. I think that they'll be able to play the basketball they want to play, and they'll stop Vanderbilt from really pushing the pace. And I may be wrong, and we may just see a repeat of last year where the quick offense is too much for St. Mary's and they lose prematurely. But I'm going to go with St. Mary's. 2 versus 15, Alabama versus Robert Morris. Alabama has had some struggles in the past few weeks, really throughout the months of February and March, but I think that they'll be able to get through Robert Morris, and I think that they'll at least be into the second round. Into the second round, I've got the 1 seed Duke versus the 8 Mississippi State. I think that Duke will win this one. I think that Duke is just too complete of a team, too strong of a team, and that they'll be able to brush them to the side quickly. And Oregon versus Akron, I think that, again, with the teams that Dana Altman has fielded at Oregon, they're always prepared for March, and they don't lose earlier than they're expected to, really. So I think coming in against a lower seeded Akron team, a team that I maintain is a very strong Akron team, I believe that they'll get the win and move to the Sweet 16. Number 6 BYU versus number 3 Wisconsin. This is an interesting one because Wisconsin starts a pair of 7-footers, but they don't rebound very well. They're outside the top 100 in rebounds per game. I think that BYU, they may be smaller in this matchup, which isn't something that happens to BYU a lot. They'll be the smaller team in this matchup. I think that they'll still manage to get through. They'll be able to match their physicality, and I think they'll be able to stifle the Wisconsin offense. And I think that we'll see BYU in the Elite Eight. And I believe facing BYU, the winner of Alabama and St. Mary's, I believe that will be St. Mary's. I'll admit, I end up picking St. Mary's to go to the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16 in a lot of years, and I find myself wrong often. But I believe that this St. Mary's team is one that does all the little things right. I believe that they're not going to get bullied by a faster paced team and be too slow or too unathletic. I believe that they'll be able to match up and they'll be efficient on offense, which is the key to really stopping Alabama. You have to really hit your shots and keep them from being able to run. That's what you saw when Florida played Alabama both times this season. They were able to knock down their shots and keep Alabama from going on the run. And also another thing to look out for in this matchup, Mark Sears in the SEC tournament was ice cold from 3 for Alabama. He's going to have to hit those 3-pointers down for Alabama to really have a chance to go on a run and even really to win that game against St. Mary's. They're going to need something more from him. And will they get it? Maybe. But I think either way, I like St. Mary's to do what they want to do on the court, slow the game down, and play their brand of basketball and win playing their brand of basketball. Now the Elite Eight in this region, Duke versus Oregon. I think Duke has been obviously one of the most complete teams all year. They've had losses, but they haven't really had many long-term prolonged struggles throughout the season, whereas Oregon has at times gone very cold, just been unable to find a win at times. And I think that the consistency in that Duke team and the fact that you know what you're going to get, they'll power through, and I believe that they'll be in the Elite Eight. And I believe that they'll be taking on St. Mary's. I believe that St. Mary's will get one over against their former conference opponent in BYU. I think that when it comes down to it, this St. Mary's team and the way they've rebounded and the way they've managed to use the limited amount of possessions they want to have in the game on offense and really maximize those will be able to hurt any team, especially a team like BYU where they can struggle from outside at times. I think that BYU will have to really hit their 3-pointers, and I think that St. Mary's will make that a tough task for them, and so I think St. Mary's will advance to the Elite Eight. And in the Elite Eight, I'd like Duke to beat St. Mary's. I think that when it comes down to it, the firepower on that Duke team with Flagg, Conkenapple, all of those guys will be enough to help them push into the Final Four. All right, the last region we'll be looking at is the Midwest region. There, the top seed is Houston. Again, I don't think we'll see any surprises. I think that they will handle SIU Edwardsville, who is in their first ever tournament appearance, so salute to them. But I believe Houston will get into the next round. Next, the 8 versus 9, Gonzaga versus Georgia. And I I really can't. I don't understand why Gonzaga is an 8 seed at all. I think in just their bracket alone, they're easily better than the 7 and the 6, and I would argue them ahead of the 5. But that's aside from the point. I do believe that they'll beat Georgia in this round, head into the next round. I think that in the past month, they have played at a level where now you can see the the basketball that you're watching has now caught up to what the metrics have suggested all year, that Gonzaga is an elite basketball team. We've now finally seen that come into fruition throughout the last few months, heading into the West Coast Conference Championship, where they beat St. Mary's after St. Mary's swept them in the regular season. Something that usually doesn't happen to them too often, but they were able to get that win back in the conference tournament, and I think that they'll continue that momentum into the next round. 5-12, we've got Clemson versus McNeese. I like McNeese State in this one. I think what Will Wade's done with this program has been awesome. McNeese State, some people are going to shy away from picking them after they lost in the first round last year after being a trendy pick, but I think that this McNeese State team is motivated, and they play good basketball, smart basketball, and I think that they'll be able to get a win against Clemson. But on to the 13 versus 4. A lot of people have High Point beating Purdue. I'm not one of them. I think that Purdue has been shaky throughout the year, but I think that their offense is still very potent. I think Braden Smith has his argument at least to be the best point guard in the country, and I would take them to advance to the round of 32 against High Point. Illinois against the winner of Texas or Xavier. I like Illinois versus either of these teams. It's unfathomable to me really that both of these teams made the tournament. I assumed it'd be one of them in and one of them out. Neither of them have any business being in ahead of West Virginia or Indiana, in my opinion. And I think that Illinois will get that win and they'll move forward. Number 3, Kentucky versus number 14, Troy. I bet Troy will become a trendier pick after Kentucky's lost in the first round the last few years, but I think Kentucky will handle the business. I think that Mark Pope will not make some of the mistakes that Cal's teams had made throughout the years, and I think that, with no disrespect to John Calipari, I think that right now, I think that Mark Pope is a better coach, and I think that this Kentucky team will be better coached, and they will get a win in the first round. UCLA versus Utah State. That was a really tough one for me because with UCLA, you see the highs, but you see the lows, and both are very extreme. When UCLA is at their best, you see a team that could have really been a 3 or a 4 seed. But when they're not playing good basketball, they're not playing their best basketball. You see a team that didn't really belong in the tournament. Especially the highlight of this was, I believe, their loss to Minnesota. They looked a mess in that game. But I think that they will be able to get past Utah State. I think that they'll be ready and that they'll be able to play their best basketball coming into the tournament. Tennessee versus Wofford. I think Tennessee, the brand of basketball they play, is just suffocating for a mid-major school, and it'll be tough for anyone else to win this game. It'll be tough for Wofford to win this game or get settled into this game, and so I think Tennessee moves on as expected, and they do it easily. On to the round of 32. Here's a tough one. Houston versus Gonzaga. Before I saw the bracket, I was thinking that if Gonzaga didn't have to play against Houston, Florida, St. John's, or Michigan State in the first 2 rounds, I was certain that they would go to the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight. But now they are playing Houston, and I believe that it'll be a very tight game. It was one that I debated on the winner a good bit, and I decided that Houston will be able to not just limit possessions, but limit possessions and making sure that the possessions that the opposition is held to in Gonzaga is are ineffective possessions. A lot of teams, they'll slow the game down versus Gonzaga, but they will run into the problem that Gonzaga can operate their offense in all types of ways, and if if they have to wait until they're late in the shot clock to get a good look, they'll do it. But I think Houston and that strong defense that they've had all year, that they've had for several years now under Kelvin Sampson, I think that they'll move on to the next round. Round of 32, next game, McNeese State versus Purdue. I like Purdue on this one. Purdue is always going to be scary because they've lost some big games in the past, but I think now they've exercised that demon getting to the national championship game last season, and I think that they'll be able to get the win against McNeese State, against a tough McNeese State team, but I think that they will be able to score back with McNeese State, and they'll be able to outscore McNeese State, and I think that gives Purdue the advantage. Kentucky versus Illinois. Illinois, to me, hasn't been terribly impressive throughout most of the season. Kentucky has also been concerning at times, and while I'm thinking about it, just something that this section of the bracket with Illinois, Kentucky, UCLA, Utah State, Tennessee, none of those teams really feel like they belong in the Elite Eight, if that makes sense, which it feels like if I had to guess before I had seen the bracket where any of these teams would have finished, I wouldn't have said Elite Eight for any of them, but somebody has to. So that makes picking these games especially tough. But I think that Kentucky will be able to score in bunches, and I think that Brea will be the X factor in this game and for this Kentucky team in general. I think that Brea will be able to get hot, and I think that Oweh on defense against Kasparis for Illinois will allow them to limit that Illinois offense. And if you can't score with this Kentucky team, the game's already over. So I think Kentucky will move into the next round. And then UCLA versus Tennessee. I'm going for the upset. I've got Tennessee going out early in the round of 32. I think that there's so many problems with Tennessee's offense at times, and you see it throughout in different games when, particularly when Chaz Lanier goes cold, they can't get anything going because they don't really have another scorer. Now, granted, throughout the SEC tournament, Jordan Gainey was amazing for Tennessee, and if he can keep that going, then that makes the Vols much more of a threat to potentially go forward. But betting on the Tennessee team that I've seen most of the year, I'm going to have to go with UCLA. Into the Sweet 16, top seeded Houston versus the number 4 Purdue. I like Purdue in this one. I think that the level of offensive output that they can give, and with Braden Smith especially, I think that he controls the game so well, and he doesn't really let that Purdue offense get off track, and I think that they'll be able to do what they need to do and find some good looks, and they'll be able to force their way past the very tough Houston defense. Number 3 seeded Kentucky versus number 7 UCLA. I like UCLA in this one. I think that I trust Mick Cronin to lead his team into a deep run, and that was really how I decided on who was getting out on that group. It really came down to which coach I trust the most, because like I was saying earlier, none of those teams really feel like they're Elite Eight teams just on paper, but somebody has to go. And so I'm going to go with the coach I believe to be the best coach in that group. Some may pick Tennessee for that. The same reason that I'm saying they would say Rick Barnes is the best coach in the group, but I would disagree. I would go for Mick Cronin, and I would go for Mick Cronin's UCLA team. But in the Elite Eight, I like Purdue to advance to the Final Four. Just what I've been saying, I think that offense is too strong. I think that they can get stops, and I think that if they need to, they can really push the pace, but they don't have to. And I think that is the happy medium that you need to see with teams in March Madness. They aren't forced to run and play heavy on the fast break, but they definitely can if need be. All right, now we're into the Final Four. My two Final Four matchups are Florida versus Michigan and Duke versus Purdue. Florida and Michigan, I think that the Michigan bench isn't deep enough to play with Florida, who uses a 9-man rotation, which is not as common in college basketball. But when you watch Florida play, you see why they use so many different guys. It's because they've got so many players that they really need to have on the floor because they impact a basketball game in positive ways. And I think that that'll wear them out, and we've seen them be able to just wear out teams that are equally as strong as them. We saw it against Alabama, primarily in the tournament, also against Tennessee. Those games stayed close for a little bit, but as they got into the second half, they just managed to really rip that lead away from the opposition. But I believe that they'll be able to pull apart from Michigan later into the second half, and that Florida will head to the national championship game. And Duke and Purdue, I believe that the problem that Duke will find is, and this could be junk science, if you will, but teams that are so reliant on so many freshmen like Duke are, most of their top players are freshmen. Teams that are built like that don't tend to win national championships. And when you compare that to Purdue, led by Braden Smith, who's been in college for some years now, I think that I lean towards Purdue being able to use their experience and get a win against Duke. And that leaves us with a national championship game of Florida against Purdue. And in that game, I think that the off-ball motion for Florida and being able to all the motion that you see, all the cuts and the backdoor screens and what have you, will be too much for the Purdue defense. They'll be able to wear them down. They'll be more active, and I believe that the Florida Gators will win the national championship this year. But that's what I'm thinking. You guys let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, and thank you for watching.